Have you ever been on a plane, maybe hitting a bit of turbulence, and that tiny, nagging thought pops into your head? What if the engines just stop? It's a super common fear, one of the biggest anxieties people have about flying. You hear that constant hum of the engines, and it feels like the only thing keeping this giant metal bird in the sky. If they go silent, you must just fall, right? Well, I'm here to tell you something that might completely change how you feel about flying. An airplane with no engine power doesn't fall out of the sky, not even close. In fact, it becomes a glider. A very, very good glider. Let's dive into the physics of how this actually works. It all comes down to four fundamental forces of flight: lift, weight, thrust, and drag. Weight is just gravity pulling the plane down. Thrust is the forward force generated by the engines, pushing the plane through the air. Drag is the air resistance pushing back against the plane. And the most important one for our discussion is lift. Lift is the upward force created by the wings. It's not the engines that hold a plane up, it's the wings. The shape of a wing, called an airfoil, is designed so that air moves faster over the top surface than the bottom. This creates a pressure difference. Lower pressure on top, higher pressure on bottom, and that difference generates lift. So, where do the engines fit in? The engines provide thrust, which gives the plane its forward speed. As long as the plane is moving forward, air is flowing over the wings, and the wings are generating lift. If the engines fail, you lose your thrust. But you don't instantly lose your forward speed. The plane has a huge amount of momentum. It's like a car coasting down a hill after you take your foot off the gas. Instead of falling, the pilot will point the nose of the plane slightly downward. This uses gravity to trade altitude for airspeed. Gravity, which was previously just pulling the plane down, now also helps pull it forward, maintaining the speed needed for the wings to keep generating lift. The plane is now in a controlled, stable glide. How far can a plane actually glide? This is where it gets really impressive. A typical commercial airliner has what's called a glide ratio of about 15:1. Some are even better, closer to 20:1. This means for every 1 mile of altitude it loses, it can travel 15 miles forward. Let's put that into perspective. A plane cruising at 35,000 feet, which is about 6.6 miles high, could theoretically glide for nearly 100 miles in perfectly still air. That's an enormous distance. If you're flying over land, that gives the pilots a massive radius of about 100 miles to find a safe airport to land. Think about it. That's like gliding from New York City almost all the way to Philadelphia, or from central London to Cambridge. You might be thinking, that's just theory. Does this actually happen? It does, and there are famous examples that prove just how capable these planes are. One of the most incredible stories is the Gimli Glider. In 1983, an Air Canada Boeing 767 completely ran out of fuel mid-flight over Canada due to a metric conversion error during refueling. Both engines flamed out at 41,000 feet. The pilots, one of whom was an experienced glider pilot, skillfully glided the massive jetliner for 22 minutes. They managed to land it safely at a decommissioned Air Force base in Gimli, Manitoba. Nobody was seriously hurt. The plane just became a 132-ton glider. A more recent and widely known example is the miracle on the Hudson. In 2009, U.S. Airways Flight 1549, an Airbus A320, struck a flock of geese just after takeoff from New York's LaGuardia Airport. Both engines were destroyed by the bird strike at only 2,800 feet. This was an extremely low altitude, leaving the pilots with very few options. Captain Sully Sullenberger and First Officer Jeffrey Skiles knew they couldn't make it back to an airport. Acting with incredible calm and professionalism, they decided their only option was to ditch the plane in the Hudson River. They glided the powerless aircraft perfectly onto the water, and all 155 people on board survived. This event showed the world that even in a worst-case scenario, at a low altitude over a dense city, a powerless plane is still a controllable aircraft. Even without engine power, pilots are far from helpless. They still have full control over the plane's flight surfaces, the ailerons on the wings for banking left and right, the elevators on the tail for pitching the nose up and down, and the rudder for yaw. But how are these controls powered? Modern jets use hydraulic systems. You might think those are powered by the engines, and you'd be right, partly. But there's a backup. When the engines fail, a device called the ram air turbine, or RAT, automatically deploys. The RAT is a small propeller that pops out from the fuselage and is spun by the airflow as the plane glides. This little propeller generates enough hydraulic pressure and electricity to power the essential flight controls and critical instruments. So, the pilots can continue to fly the plane with precision. Now, let's talk about how rare this event actually is. The odds of a single engine failing on a modern commercial jet are already incredibly small, something like 1 in 500,000 flight hours. The odds of both engines failing are astronomical. It's a 1 in a billion level event. Engines are marvels of engineering, built with multiple redundancies and subjected to rigorous testing and maintenance schedules. They are designed to withstand bird strikes, severe weather, and immense stress. Furthermore, commercial pilots spend countless hours in simulators practicing for this exact scenario. For them, an engine failure isn't a panic-inducing catastrophe. It's a problem they have been trained to solve step by step. They have checklists and procedures drilled into them for handling it calmly and effectively. They practice gliding the plane, finding a suitable landing spot, and executing a safe landing without power. So, let's recap some comforting facts. First, planes don't fall, they glide. And they glide incredibly well for huge distances. Second, pilots are extensively trained to handle this exact situation. It's a standard part of their training curriculum. Third, even with no engines, pilots retain full control of the aircraft thanks to backup systems like the ram air turbine. And finally, the chance of a double engine failure is almost vanishingly small. You are statistically more likely to be struck by lightning or win the lottery than to be on a flight where both engines fail. The next time you're on a plane and you feel that little flicker of anxiety, remember the Gimli Glider and the miracle on the Hudson. Remember that your plane is designed to be a glider, and your pilots are trained professionals ready for anything. Flying is, by a huge margin, the safest form of long-distance travel ever invented. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the incredible view from 35,000 feet. The science is on your side. Thanks for watching. And if you found this reassuring, consider liking and subscribing for more content that demystifies the world around us. Fly safe.